Thank you for the opportunity to present a critique based on the theme of this conference. In fact, we were pleasantly surprised when our abstract was accepted. We are grateful for your open mind. I am Arkal Gaud Ramaprasad. I go by Ram. I am Professor Emeritus of Information and Decision Sciences at the University of Illinois at Chicago. My co-authors are Chetan Singhai and Tanveer Hassan. They are doctoral students at the National Institute of Advanced Studies and the University of Mysore, respectively, in India. They could not attend the conference. The subtitle of the presentation, How to Avoid Half Policies, is a play of the title of the latest book, Half Girlfriend, by Chetan Bhagat, a popular author in India. Our paper is unrelated to the plot of the book, but the idea of avoiding half policies, based only on changes and not constants, captures the essence of our presentation. Some of the greatest advances in the sciences have been motivated by discovery of constants. In mathematics, the equation, sometimes called Euler's identity, relates 5 constants: e, the base of the natural logarithm; I, the square root of -1, an imaginary number; pi, the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter; and the numbers 1 and 0. In physics, the constancy of the speed of light and the universality of the gravitational constant are fundamental discoveries. In chemistry, the atomic numbers have been discovered to be constant. In biology, the genes are constant. In cognitive science, the capacity of the short-term memory is constant, more or less, 7 plus or minus 2. In higher education, are there constants or only changes? If you were to look at the brochure statement, it would look like it's only changes. That's what motivated our abstract. The theme of the conference was focused exclusively on changes. We suggest that an asymmetric focus on change to the exclusion of constants will result in half policies and ineffective policies. The focus on constants and the associated continuity is not new, but it has not been systematic. We'll give some examples here. For example, even as the universities have added the research and then economic development to their academic mission, they have continued with their teaching mission as discussed by a number of authors. Bender and Sandstrom 2000 suggests that the forces of change and continuity are engaged in a process of negotiation about the normative regulation of academic research in the process of institutionalizing the triple helix. Aktovitz and Leistov 118 suggests that the university's unique comparative advantage is that it combines continuity with change. There is a symbiotic relationship between change and continuity in a university, which has to be managed for sustaining the transformation, alluded to by many authors. We present a framework to incorporate both changes and constants in formulating higher education policies for its principal mission. We present the framework as an ontology with the following characteristics. It includes both changes and constants. It is symmetric and not asymmetric. It is full and not half. It is systematic and not ad hoc. It is logically constructed. It is systemic and not asystemic. It is complete, or it can be made complete. We will explain the framework in the next few slides. The taxonomy of the principal mission of higher education is based on the conference theme statement. They are preparation for professional, personal, and civic life, to be employed productively, to be satisfied personally, and to be a good citizen. The taxonomy can be extended to include new missions. The taxonomy itself has been constant in the past few decades, but the relative priority of its categories has been changing, sometimes explicitly and sometimes implicitly. The resources, time and money students can spend on higher education has limited elasticity. Consequently, an increased emphasis on one mission has to be at the expense of emphasis on another mission. The changes have to sum to zero. It has been argued that the increasing emphasis on professional programs like business, engineering, and medicine, and decreasing emphasis on humanities, social sciences, and liberal arts programs is shifting the priority away from civic and personal life preparation to professional life preparation. However, There's an attempt to balance. For example, in India, there's a legal mandate for professional institutions to offer a course on Constitution of India, environment education, and human resource management in order to develop civic and personal life of the students. Similarly, the stakeholders in higher education may agree on the importance of the three principal missions but may disagree on their priority. As such, they may advocate changes to and the constancy of different higher education policies. We will discuss the stakeholders next. The four primary stakeholders in higher education are the government, university, employer, and the student. They are also called actors in some countries. The first three are seen as part of the triple helix in one stream of research. The taxonomy can be extended to include additional stakeholders or actors, or refined to include their subcategories. For example, the government may have federal, state, and local government as subcategories. The stakeholders' stake in higher education are different. Consequently, their mission priorities and policies are likely to be different. A traditional university may rank personal and civic life preparation over professional life preparation. The government and employers concerned about the readiness for employment of graduates may rank professional life preparation over the others, while many students may not want to face the rigor of professional preparation, not see the value in civic preparation, and hence simply focus on personal life preparation. Many countries are facing the problem of unemployed and unemployable graduates of humanities and social sciences. The four stakeholders' propensity to change or to be constant is also very different. Among them, the employers are likely to have the greatest propensity to change, the university the least, with the government and the students in between. Each is driven by a different set of forces, the employers by the market forces, the university by the internal governance forces, the democratic governments by the election cycle, and students by the generational changes. The stakeholders are also highly interdependent, as argued by the triple helix model, in resources and in regulations. The policy changes and constants have to work with and within these interdependencies. Thus, the policies each stakeholder changes or maintains constant is driven by the respective priorities, propensities to change or to be constant, and interdependencies. Higher education policy attributes. Here we focus on the three broad important types of policy related to resources, teaching, and learning. Other types of policies can be added to the taxonomy to expand the scope of the framework. Policies on resources can be further categorized as those related to its availability, accessibility, and affordability. Resources for higher education, teaching, and learning have to be available, accessible, and affordable to be effective. Availability does not assure accessibility. Accessibility does not assure affordability. Increasing investment in higher education by developing countries like India and China, decreasing availability of financial resources for higher education in developed countries, demographic changes in these countries, and technological innovations are catalyzing a re-examination of the policies regarding resources by the stakeholders. In the West, they are seeking to accommodate the changes while holding constant principles such as universal access to excellence. In the East, they are seeking to change from the historical principle of selective access to higher education to universal access to higher education. Policies on teaching have been the focus of higher education to improve the quality of graduates, to fulfill the mission of the professional, personal, and civic life preparation. Policies on modes of teaching focus on the curriculum, pedagogy, and evaluation, etc. Those on the conditions of teaching focus on classrooms, class sizes, laboratories, infrastructure, etc. Policies on learning are relatively of recent origin. They are a consequence of the shift from focus on teaching to learning. The increasing importance given to assessment of learning outcomes, distinct from the grading for determining the performance in the class, has focused attention of the stakeholders on the modes of learning as well as conditions of learning. New information and communication technologies have the potential to fundamentally transform the availability, accessibility, and affordability of resources for higher education. Consequently, they also have the greatest potential to create the most tension between change and continuity in teaching and learning modes and conditions. Should teaching modes change radically or incrementally under the new conditions? Will learning modes be constant or change radically under the new conditions? These are some of the issues confronting higher education policy. In the next slide, we discuss the dynamics of change and constants. Policy changes are often labeled as reforms, connoting incremental changes within the present framework, and as innovations, connoting radical changes with the introduction of new ideas outside the present framework. Changing the course syllabi, streamlining the graduation requirements, and the like may be called reforms. Blended learning programs, where students can take a blend of online and face-to-face courses, or where each course is a mix of online and face-to-face interaction, may be called innovations. Similarly, introducing total quality management systems for mapping, organizing, and enhancing quality in higher education could be considered as a key policy change within universities. Policy constants are often labeled as practices, formal and informal, and foundations, often codified. Ideas such as access to excellence embodied in the vision of the university are usually constant over extended periods of time. Similarly, in India, concern for gender and caste-based equity has been a policy constant, while they form the foundation for admission, education, and graduation policies and practices, which too tend to be constant over time. University governance practices too tend to be constant. This is where we come to the framework. In this slide, we have assembled the 4 dimensions discussed earlier together with the appropriate suffixes and prefixes to construct an ontology. The dimensions are arranged left to right such that one can construct a natural language sentence by combining an element or a category or a subcategory from each column together with the adjacent suffixes or prefixes. Each such sentence is a component of the domain of higher education policies for its principal mission. There are 336 such components encapsulated in the ontology. These components are symmetrically divided between changes and constants, 118 each. They are systematically derived and systemically define the domain. The set includes at the extremes government policy reforms or changes in higher education resources, availability for professional life preparation, and student policy foundations or constants in learning conditions for civic life preparation. Among the 336 components, some may be very important, some important, and others are not important in fulfilling the principal mission of higher education. In the same vein, some may facilitate the fulfillment of the principal mission, some may inhibit its fulfillment, and some may be neutral in their effect. Some changes may be facilitators and others may be inhibitors. Some constants may be inhibitors, but others may be facilitators. Such changes may be functional and others dysfunctional. Some constants may be dysfunctional, but others functional. Each stakeholder has to identify the importance of each component and its role as a facilitator or an inhibitor. Its functionality or dysfunctionality will be critical to developing a comprehensive strategy for the fulfillment of the principal mission. We'll give some illustrations. Here are some of the components that can be derived from the ontology. Consider the following illustrative components with examples. Government policy changes, reforms in higher education resources availability for professional life preparation. For example, building digital bridges for higher education in remote and impoverished areas. University policy changes, innovation in higher education teaching modes for personal life preparation. For example, flipped courses in managing work-life balance. Student policy constants, practices in higher education learning modes for civic life preparation. For example, ongoing in-situ participation in service learning. And employer policy constants, foundations in higher education teaching conditions for professional life preparation. For example, continued assessment of teaching effectiveness. The last two illustrate the importance of explicitly stating the constants in higher education policies. In the next 2 slides, we will discuss the application of the ontology and present our conclusions. The ontology can be used as a systematic, symmetric lens to study and map the policies systematically. Such a mapping will highlight the bright components of the domain, policies which have been given a lot of attention, light components, policies which have been given some attention, and blind/blank components, policies which have been given little or no attention. Our guess would be that policies with constants will be mostly blind or blank, and maybe sometimes light. The brightness of a component can be interpreted in 2 opposing ways. Resolving the duality will be necessary for the formulation of strong policies, a concept we have borrowed from that of strong inference by Platt in 1964. A bright component that is emphasized a lot may be important and rightly emphasized. It may also be a consequence of feedback and learning from the success of similar policies in the past, but it may also be simply easy and hence overemphasized to the exclusion of more difficult policies, possibly more risky policies. It may be a consequence of doing more of the same because of the absence of feedback and learning or having no feedback. A light component may be less important and hence not emphasized. Again, it may be a consequence of feedback and learning from the degree of success of similar policies in the past, but it may also be difficult and hence underemphasized, and possibly more risky as well. It may be a consequence of choosing the easiest path despite the ineffectiveness and avoiding the possibly riskier but potentially more effective difficult path. A blind/blank component may be so because it's simply been overlooked. The oversight can be corrected. On the other hand, it may also be infeasible. Our guess would be that most of the empty components with the constants will be blind and not blank. Thus, the ontology with the mapping can be used to systematically identify the changes to be made and the constants to be maintained. The ontology is a lens to study the policies for fulfilling the principal mission of higher education. If we don't seek the constants, we won't see them. In conclusion, we return to this subtitle of our presentation. Focus on change alone to the exclusion of constants will result in half policies for higher education to fulfill its principal mission. Focus on both changes and constants are necessary to design full policies. The two are symbiotic. Constants should not simply be the implicit complements of residues or residuals of change. They have to be asserted just as the changes are. Without the constants and only the changes, an institution risks the loss of its identity. The ontology provides a symmetric, systematic, and systemic framework to formulate strong policies. Mapping the policies onto the ontologies will reveal the functional and the dysfunctional, bright, light, blind, and blank spots. On the other hand, with an ad hoc approach, the more things change, the more they will remain the same. Perhaps some of the changes should have been constants and some of the constants should have been changed. Thank you.